I have to say that originally when this class series started, we had hoped that maybe we would be able to finish the class, have the last class together in person. And I have to admit that I rather doubted of that possibility, but still, here we are. And so with an extended lockdown, if you've been enjoying it, then maybe it has certain benefits. Of course, there are lots of challenges associated with it as well, but it nevertheless is happening. And so, as Master advised us, what comes of itself, let it come. We must stand unshaken amidst the crash of breaking worlds. And also, it really does put life into perspective. This class is titled Going Deeper on the Spiritual Path, and there's nothing like something like this world crisis for, as I said at the beginning of the class some weeks ago, not only for us to sort of reevaluate our priorities, but also for the whole world to possibly reevaluate its priorities. And so we've had this opportunity. This class is a little bit different compared to the other classes. You could say, in a way, it's the culmination of these classes. It has to be, since it's the final class after all. But it's by default the culmination. But also, in terms of starting from the topic or the thought, how to go deeper on the spiritual path, we've seen that once we meditate, once we practice our techniques, once we do our sadhana, then at the end of it, what else do we do with the rest of our day? Not only what specific activities do we engage in, whatever kind of work we do, what attitude do we do it with? What attitudes do we hold internally? What do we strive to accomplish in our behavior? In a certain way, you could say that going deeper on the spiritual path, once you have your meditation, which is, of course, go deeper in meditation, and that counts for a lot. But still, how can we effectively use the rest of our time and go deeper in that way? In fact, it's interesting, meaning go deeper in other activities, in other ways, like holding the right attitude, watching how we speak to other people, trying to relax our hearts when somebody is shouting at us, rather than immediately tensing up and saying, "Oh yes, and what about you?" But it was interesting when Ananda first came to India. It was a little bit unusual for those of us who grew up in America, because in America you can say, "Oh, I do yoga," and that's enough to define yourself compared to what most people do. "Oh, you do yoga." There's no concept of what kind of yoga or who is the guru or anything like that. It's just yoga. Okay, that's kind of strange. It's changing in America now, and so nowadays, yes, it is. But this was 14 years ago and earlier. But in India, we couldn't say we do yoga. Lots of people do yoga. I was joking once that saying, we opening up a meditation center and saying we teach yoga is like opening up a restaurant and saying we serve food. And the food, what kind of food, and so on. And so we could say, well, we have a guru. Well, lots of people in India have gurus. We have an ashram. Well, lots of people have ashrams. And so there wasn't sort of the usual easy ways to define ourselves or to separate ourselves out from the main track. Not that we were trying to be separated, but just trying to be clear in who we were and what we were practicing and what we had to offer for those who were interested. After all, you don't go to a South Indian restaurant and order, Italian food. And so you order the food that's served there. And if you go there, you want to know what they have to offer, and hopefully they do a good job of it. So again, what was interesting then was while we were sort of working on that, what we found was that many of the Indians approached us after a while and said, we're glad to know about Kriya Yoga, and we're glad to know about all the things that you do, which is so much like our teachings that in many other places. But they said, we are very impressed with the character of the Ananda people. And that was interesting to me because that wasn't something I have to admit, I was very impressed with the character of the Ananda people too when I first came to Ananda and subsequently. But I mean, that was something that struck me very strongly about whatever philosophy these people have, whatever techniques they practice, something is working. Because you couldn't fake the level of kindness, the sincerity, the clarity, the light in the eyes, the good feeling on so many people. You know, in other words, you could get a few people who were excellent actors and they could come out whenever guests came and sort of parade around and look very spiritual. But you wouldn't be able to duplicate that in so many people, or at least the explanation would be so complicated that everybody got together and rehearsed. Oh, look, you know, Dharmarajan's coming. Let's all get into character. The much simpler explanation would be that this is just, in fact, how they were. And even if there was no witnesses around, applying Occam's razor, we hope the simpler solution is the truth. In fact, I found that to be true years later when someone said to me, she had been a guest of ours at an event, and afterwards I was waiting with her for her car. And, you know, her car was coming and everything, but I was just standing there waiting with her. It was, you know, daylight. It wasn't a question of safety. It was just basically out of courtesy. And she said, you know, the car's coming. You don't have to stand here. This was in America. So, and she was a part of another spiritual group. She was the head of it, in fact. And I said, we offer full service or something like that, door-to-door service or something, I don't know what. And then she said, you people really have the sweet thing down, don't you? And I just looked at her and said, you know, this is just who we are. This is just how we are. I didn't really know what to say because it really was sincere. And she kind of looked, she gave me a look I didn't understand. But later, my friend who was driving her in that car back home said to me that she asked, this woman guest asked my friend, why, you know, basically, how are people so spiritual or so peaceful, I forget, at Ananda? And my friend said, well, they're trying to overcome the ego. And this woman said, everyone's trying to overcome the ego. You know, basically, why is it working for you all? And my friend said quite wisely, I think it comes from the top. It's because it comes from the top, from Swami Kriyananda in this case, and of course Master's power behind him. And so you could say that to go deeper on the spiritual path, we have to look at our character in a positive, encouraging way, not finding all of our defects and saying, in all these ways I am unworthy. Remember, it takes very, very, very good karma even to want to know God, even to think, oh, I have all these flaws and these things that are wrong with me. In a way is good because it's a sign of humility. Better to think that than the opposite. On the other hand, if it is not useful, if it's just a way to make ourselves smaller, beat ourselves down, and also give us an excuse to not try or weaken our willpower, it's not useful, so therefore we shouldn't engage in it. The yogi is very practical. The motto of yoga, I'm sure this is one of the Yoga Sutras, though my Sanskrit isn't very strong. Somewhere Patanjali must say, do what works. Certainly Swamiji said that so many times. Just do what works and don't do what isn't working. Stop doing what doesn't work. And this applies especially to our attitudes. If our attitudes are making the face in the mirror look sadder and sadder and sadder, we need to stop and find something else. Find a way to make a joke out of it. And so on. I had a friend who, I think she didn't do this, but she had another friend who tried to run a business and just basically failed miserably at it, but kept going, and they didn't replace her with anybody else. She was a yogi, and she just said, Lord, if you want the job done better, then get someone else. You know, and then meanwhile, she just did the best she could. And, I don't know how reverent her attitude was, but you could see the charm of it, that she just accepted, this is what I can do, and I'm just going to go on doing it. I wish I knew the rest of the story. Maybe it has a happy ending. I don't know. But in any case, to go deeper on the spiritual path, to overcome the ego, because remember, that is the point of the spiritual path, we can look at our behavior also. And that's really what we've been focusing on this class. Rather than looking at the yamas and niyamas, which are a perfectly valid way, and in a certain way, this class, you could say, is an application of the yamas and niyamas, we've been exploring the topic of renunciation. Now, in a certain way, renunciation comes from, you could say, the niyama of tapasya, which in English, of course, it translates to austerity, but really it's living an uncluttered life, focusing our life. And no matter what, whether we think of renunciation literally or not, all of us as yogis are focusing our lives in two ways, at least. One is that we start to choose meditation. We start to choose spiritual reading and so on. We start to choose satsang, coming to a class like this, and the morning sadhanas and other things. We make these positive choices. But the other way that we focus our lives is that we lose our taste for a lot of other things from the past. We used to really enjoy perhaps some really rajasic music, and now when we listen to it, we just find it tiresome or boring or unimaginative or sort of immature. Or we used to love spending time gossiping with everybody. But now when we do it, our heart starts to hurt a little bit because our heart has become more soft, it has become more open. And then we don't like the pinch that we feel when we speak unkindly or even to hear someone else speak unkindly. And so again, it's not that we run around correcting everybody. We didn't like it if we were ever corrected back in the day. But we just find ourselves not yearning for more of that kind of diet, and we end up choosing automatically healthier foods. This may be a disappointment to some of our friends and family who say, why can't you join me at the trough to drink the same old poison we used to always enjoy? But we just don't find it as enjoyable anymore. And since so much of what we do is driven by desire, it's better to have spiritual desires. It's more useful, because they drive us in the right direction. And so the more we live in God, the more we want to live in God. The more we meditate, the more we want to meditate. So we should look at renunciation then really as choosing to focus our lives on that which is lasting, on that which is permanent, and that which we're already enjoying so much of anyway. It's a gradual process. Renunciation you can think of as something that's been a part of you as long as you've been on the spiritual path. In this life, for sure, and in past lives. Whether literally, in past lives you were a formal renunciate, a monk or a nun, for example, or perhaps living in a spiritual community or a Vedic village, which was really focused every day on God and, seeing God, keeping God reminding thoughts in our head as we are acting and so on. But in this life, you've been a renunciate, perhaps even unknowingly, by choosing the spiritual path, especially if you've traveled some ways on it, if you've become a disciple, if you've become a Kriyaban. For example, these are instances of the kind of life commitment that people make that demonstrates their willpower, their energy, but also their desire, their interest. The fact that they like this. I get something out of this and it's worth it to me to continue. And so, and to see what's lying around the corner, or what awaits around the corner, I should say. So, having said that, then I say all this why? Partly because it's an interesting, at least to me, way of introducing renunciation rather than in sort of the traditional ways that I myself have even talked about it. But also because, as with anything, if it has been a part of our history, then it can be a little bit perhaps unclear, made unclear. Any concepts, which is all of Hinduism, for example, or Sanatana Dharma really, that has passed through Kali Yuga, has emerged from Kali Yuga on the other side with still Kali Yuga, with a little bit of Kali still on it, just still a little bit darkened. And so it's important for us, as the masters always do, to bring to the surface of our awareness, or plumb to the depths, to mix the metaphor, to get the pure teachings once again, to give an emphasis that mankind needs right now, and so on. So that's really what renunciation is in need of. So you'll need to let go of traditional thoughts of what it means to be a monk or a nun and so on. It isn't that these rules have become more relaxed. In fact, with the Nayaswami order, as we're going to go into, they've become more strict. But I don't want to say more about that right now, because we're going to watch a video of Swamiji speaking at a Nayaswami order initiation. Just a little bit of background on this historically to set it for you. Anyway, I hope this will speak for itself. These videos certainly will. But in 2009, November, Swamiji held the first Nayaswami order initiation. The genesis, he was writing this book about the Nayaswami order. Many of us at Ananda, I have to admit, at least myself, but many others were confused about what was this new renunciate order he was talking about, because within Ananda we have a renunciate order that is part of Ananda. The Nayaswami order is broader than Ananda. Many members of it are Ananda members, but there are many members of it who are not a part of Ananda. It is not linked to Yoganandaji as the guru of the renunciates in this order. Yoganandaji does serve as the inspiration for it, and in fact it's through Yoganandaji that the Nayaswami order is part of the Shankara Swami order, because Sri Yukteswar Giri and Yogananda Giri, even though he didn't use that name very often, but so Swami Kriyananda Giri, and then that passed on that way. But still, the Nayaswami order is, as I said, broader. Also, what it comes down to is, though we have a renunciate order within Ananda, which is open to all people who are Kriyabans and who have been connected with the community and all that, we don't actually have an active expression of it much in India yet, except for the monks. The monks are part of that Ananda order as well. But it's not a formal renunciate order where you change the clothes that you wear, that you live a certain lifestyle outwardly and so on. Again, please remember, what matters most of all is your inner attitude and what your life's path is teaching you, rather than that one way is better than another. It's sort of like saying being in business is better than cooking, or that's better than being an artist, or being an artist is better than being a repairman. You can't say it. All of these are valid paths, valid vocations, and you can be a really sort of conceited artist, and you can be a saintly plumber. And so, it really matters what's inside, and also we don't know what karma we're working out. So, to a certain extent, whether we become a formal renunciate or not is a question of karma. It's really a question of what would be the best path for us. And that's an individual choice, and sometimes that choice is made for you without you even realizing it. And you find yourself in this path one way or another. And then begin to raise the question, oh, well, what if I had or hadn't? Don't worry, God was guiding you, and you're on the right path for you, and it is the fastest path for you. So no worries. On the other hand, it's helpful to know that there are options, there are paths available. And in fact, the Nayaswami order has something available for everyone, in any walk of life, you could say. So again, in 2009, Swamiji was writing this book. We were all struggling, myself included, to grasp what it was that he was putting forward that was new. And that's one thing that you all are more or less spared of right now, is that Swamiji was constantly coming out with new things that would often even change the whole direction of Ananda or the whole definition of Ananda, or would broaden it. And so we were always trying to relate to where he was directing us. But then someone asked him, he was in Italy and he was dressed, he decided the Nayaswami order color should be blue, and so he was dressed in a blue robe, and he was in Italy, and there was a priest who came up to him at a conference and said, "So I see you in this blue, and what does it mean?" And Swami Kriyananda said, "Well, I am a member of a renunciate order, a new renunciate order that I've started." And the man said, "How many members do you have?" And Swamiji said, "One." And so he thought, well, it's probably high time that we open this up now, because so it was beautiful, really. He called people. This is something you initiate. In other words, you say, "I would like to do it." It's not something that people are assigned or recruited for. Just like discipleship, you as a disciple say, "I want to take this vow." No one sort of just assigns it to you or just says, "Why don't you take it?" And so he offered this invitation, and many people from America flew to Italy for this initiation. It was, he said, basically, "I'm going to be giving it this weekend." And so many people went, Jyotishji, Deviji, many of the center leaders from America, many that you know, and so on. So a whole group went. It was very inspiring to see their devotion and their eagerness to be with Swamiji for a special, step in their lives, obviously. So after that was in November. So then a few months later, in January, January 5th, in fact, Master's birthday, Swamiji gave another initiation in Gurgaon. And that was for all the people in North India who were, in Gurgaon and Delhi and Noida. And at that time, that was the major sort of base of our work in India. And then a few months later, in April, he went to Pune. I mean, he was in Pune before that, but he decided to hold an initiation in Pune. And this was the third initiation and also the last initiation. Maybe he did one more a year later, but that was more or less in an informal gathering. In fact, I don't know if he even performed the initiation himself. Maybe he did. But in any case, this third one in Pune, which we're about to watch the video of, was the last major initiation, all done at that starting time. And in any case, it was a big moment. And another thing that evolved from it, which I think we may have talked about, but if not, the different vows that are available in the Nayaswami order, especially as Swamiji first presented it, were the brahmacharya vow for those people who are unmarried and wish to remain unmarried throughout their lives and live as renunciates. And so then there was also, he created a new vow called the Tyaga vow. People who take the vow become Tyagis. He did have brahmacharis and brahmacharinis and tyagis and tyaginis. Somehow tyagini just hasn't really stuck. In fact, it was sweet. There was somebody named Tyagini. He had given her that spiritual name. And when he was announcing the order, he said to her, "We're going to have to give you a new name." And so, but somehow people tend not to say tyagi all that much even for the females of the order. But anyway, these are for married people who are both taking this step. In other words, it's not, well, the wife wants to do it, but the husband doesn't, or vice versa. Both of them wish to take this step. And one of the requirements of that, so you have single people, you have married people, both of them can become Nayaswamis in time. And so, but for the Tyagis, one requirement was that the children should be over 18 years old, because before then, the parents aren't really free to just, it's not to say to be independent of your children. It's not that you ever dump your kids. That's not part of the vow. But obviously, when the children are younger, so much of the parent's life necessarily and rightly needs to be focused on supporting the children. And so that is acknowledged in saying that the children should be at least 18 or older, obviously. I remember one woman who said to Swamiji, "I want to become a nun." and she had two children. And Swamiji, she was no longer married, but she still had the children with her. And Swamiji said, it's not right. She said, but Swamiji, I really feel this deep calling, and it's so spiritual and so on. Swamiji said, children need their mother. And so then she accepted his verdict. So again, it was always very balanced. But what was interesting was that when Swamiji presented when these vows, he didn't present them, but because he was in Italy, but when these vows were talked about in America, some people are asking, now what is this vow and what does it mean? And if we take it, then what are we supposed to do? And if we don't take it, but somebody else takes it, then how are we supposed to speak to them? Somebody even said to Jyotishji and Deviji, if you take this vow, how shall we then henceforth address you? And Jyotishji said, I'm Jyotish, and this is my wife Devi. None of this, Shri Shri 108, HHH, His Holiness, Nayaswami Jyotish Ji, 108 again. It's just, just look, we're just souls and just people, and the same people you've known all this time. But some people, when this door was finally opened to some people who had felt this inner calling, as one person asked me, do you take this vow because you feel an actual desire to do so? And I said, yes, because I knew she didn't have a desire to do it. And I didn't know how to basically say that to her. You don't really want this. It's a hard thing to say to somebody. So anyway, we came around to it. Luckily, she realized that on her own, so she could. She said, I'm going to have to think about this. And so she didn't have to lose any face or anything like that. So, so there were all these questions in America about the vows. And in Italy, there were similar questions to that. There was a little more flexibility, but still kind of like, now, what does this mean? And in India, when these vows were discussed, people said, I want to take a vow. It's like, I'm married and I have kids who are young, but I want to take a vow. It was such a positive embracing. This is wonderful. Is there a vow for me too? Rather than sort of reading the fine print on the contract and I'll see. It was, please, let me in. I want to be a part of this. It was beautiful. So it was in India. India was the inspiration for Swamiji to create the pilgrim vow. And that... So you'll see that vow being taken also in a little bit. I guess I jumped ahead of myself because I wanted to tell these things in between. But anyway, now you have the whole picture. What we're going to do is watch about a 15-minute video of Swamiji introducing the vow ceremony, speaking, and then we're going to watch the individual vows. But in between, after we watch the first video, I'm going to ask you for comments. What you liked about what he said, or what you liked about watching the video, or a question that you have, okay? And we'd like you to have your camera on and your audio, and so please be ready to do that if you can. It's much nicer to see you than this. Well, I don't want to say anything against the camera lest I hurt it. Thank you, camera. It connects us all, but all of you are much more attractive than this camera. And so, sorry, camera. But yes, that's what I wanted to say. This video was filmed in Swamiji's home in Pune. So if you've been to his home in Pune, that's where this was. And it was a very special night, as you'll hear Swamiji explain. I'm very sorry to have to cut it off there. In fact, I guess I didn't quite let him finish the talk, but actually there's more that we'll see of it. So now it's your turn. If you could come on with video and audio, we'll probably switch to gallery mode. But if you could just let us know what you liked about either something Swamiji said, or if what you liked about seeing the video generally, or if you have a question. Or if you can think of some fourth category, then we can consider that too. Okay? If you see me looking here, it's just because I'm looking at the TV screen, which is over there. And I'm even farther away from it, so it's a little harder for me to see. And anyway, what's nice is I get to recognize you all just by your sheer faces. So, very nice to see you all. So, okay. Well, in fact, why don't, Rosanna, why don't you move it a little more closer? Because it's sort of like, I think someone's on there. No, okay. So, okay. Sugantha and Gopal, what would you like to say?
So I was thinking when Swamiji was quoting Shankara, Adi Shankara, and referring to how I was just thinking, why did Adi Shankara did not think about this affirming way of putting it, so that people had taken it in a positive way. Why I can't think that it didn't occur to him, but what was the reason I was thinking?
And you're asking?
And I'm asking.
Okay, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
as Swamiji explains, and he goes into it in much more detail in the book, that in Kali Yuga, life was so material and in a certain sense so even gross. We just finished the Easter season where we all know the story now of Jesus being crucified and, just being held up before the public and nailed to some wooden boards and, up high enough that all the crowd could see. It's horrifying. And yet this was standard practice. We think it's bad when the police pull us over and ask for 50 rupees, but this is much worse. It was so commonplace. You just walked, it would be like driving down Anasalai and seeing all kinds of people still alive, not yet dead in this way. It's horrific. We can't even imagine a picture of it, much less seeing it. But in that time, fine. India went through Kali Yuga too, and there was a lot of brutality. Sometimes it manifests in other ways, but so you have to really state the laws clearly, strictly, and very materialistically. Don't stay in a place more than 3 days. Don't keep any money. Don't own any possessions. Don't, just beg for your food. Don't retain any kind of food, and so on. Very specific. Meanwhile, if you think about it, you can think whatever you want. In fact, you can become extremely proud. See all the things I have denied myself, that these worldly people just indulge in. I am pure, I am a true Swami, and so on. And what good does that pride do you spiritually? So what good are these outward practices if they just feed the ego? And so it goes on. So as Swamiji said, it wasn't that Shankara didn't know more than he said. Of course he did. But it was we can now, for example, speak of energy, and that it takes energy, and, I need more energy, and let's tune into the energy of the project and raise your energy. And in fact, I could feel his energy was a little bit off, but her energy was great. We don't even really know what energy is, though. We can't even define it as a word, except in some nonsense way. But we know what it is. We feel it. We just sort of grasp it, intuitively even. And so it also doesn't mean that all the Swamis in Kali Yuga were unhappy or miserable. For example, Swami Sri Yukteswar, Master, and Swami Vivekananda, and there are many, those are recent Swamis, relatively speaking. But in general, the rules had to be stated very outwardly in terms of outer behavior, and he chose to state them in the negative because it was perhaps the only way to say it. Because what can you say? You should be generous, you should give, you should serve others. This is all implied, but so many of the vows are stated, and I choose not to do this for the sake of God. So it would be interesting to be able to interview Shankara on this and ask for his perspective. And what did he think of the Swami order as it had started from what he did and passed through Kali Yuga to what it became? In fact, interestingly, first of all, historically, remember, Shankara did not create the Swami order. He just reorganized it from the state that he found it in. In other words, he said the Swami order is not serving people and it needs to be refocused and redefined and clarified to fulfill its mission again. And in fact, the Nayaswami order is just that. It's doing the same thing. It's again stricter because its vows apply to what you think and how you behave. How you feel, not just what your outer actions are. But it's also appropriate because Swamis nowadays in the traditional Shankara order, they do, many of them, own property and stay in a place more than 3 days and don't beg for food and so on. And people generally don't criticize them for breaking these rules if their efforts are directed towards serving society, if they seem to be sharing what they have with others, if they are growing spiritually, they're a great blessing to have. If they're all trying to just take it to themselves like an empire, then that is a problem, and that's what Shankara was warning against. But the main thing is the reason why you don't stay in a place more than 3 days is not to develop an attachment. But it's hard when you go to a place and suddenly you find a huge demand. Not to put too fine a point on it, but what if, Dharmini and I came here and after 3 days we had to go? I think that would be easy. I would just go from CIT Nagar. No, I would go from East Road to West Road and then back to East Road and just alternate every 3 days. But the point is that there's such interest here and it takes a while to build relationships and to establish something. Why just move on that way after 3 days? But work on developing your detachment. Anyway, it's a big subject and I don't want to go into it too deeply, but Shankara didn't state it that way, not because of a lack on his part, but because of a lack on the understanding of people around him. And who knows, in maybe another 2,000 years or 3,000 years, people will redefine the order and make it even more clear to speak in terms of mental power and different things of Treta Yuga that we aren't able to understand now. It's not a question of what is the full truth, it's the question of what is the right aspect of truth that we are equipped to understand and practice in a practical way, in a realistic way. Okay?
Yeah.
At the end of the book, Swami Kriyananda shares how he believes that master may have been Shankara in a past life. So, you could read about that too if you like. Okay, so next question. The gentleman sitting to your left. Or comment. Did you like the video?
Yeah, I like the video, but I thought it's not full. It's a little incomplete.
Incomplete. That is the truth. You have perceived deeply. I'll send a link out to the full video so that you all can watch the whole thing because it's very powerful. It pained me to have to stop it. Yeah.
And what actually inspired me was he said about one incident where one person, he got annoyed with him and then came and shouted about another and all that. He didn't react at all. This I have been reading. I've been reading the book also, the new part. And many such instances like Swamiji is reasserting this particular point, I feel. And that's really appealing to me.
Very good. Very good. I really like...
I have thought like it.
Say again? Say the last part again?
Yeah, wish. I could also follow that example.
Yes, exactly. And I really like what Gopal said about, all these examples that he's read of Swamiji, or in this case, seen Swamiji tell about. It's very appealing. And I have to admit, that's really what attracts most of us onto the spiritual path, or it should be, is that it's appealing. It's attractive. We say, yes, I want that. First of all, I'm inspired by the strength it would take, the strength of calmness, the strength of will. Swamiji was not silent from a position of weakness. And that's part of why the spiritual path is so hard to explain to some people, because we hear something like that and say, oh, it's so appealing. And other people may hear it and go, what? Are you kidding? That man deserved a piece of Swamiji's mind. He should have put him in his place. How does it help the man to just get away with it? And on and on and on. It doesn't attract them at all. And that's fine. It's even probably possible to be spiritual and be kind of fiery and like that if you want to. But when we see something like that that is so appealing, then, in fact, even this path of renunciation, that's something we should follow. And if we see something that isn't appealing, but that's a part of the Ananda world, we maybe just should put it on a shelf and say, I'm not sure if I like that or how I feel about it, but I like all the rest of the thali, so maybe I'll just put this side dish to the side for now, and then maybe I'll revisit it later. So anyway, very good. Thank you. Okay. Mary, you had come and gone. You are now hiding. Okay, not there. Well, come back. Okay. Purni. There she is. Okay, Purni. Hi.
Hi, Chief. Namaste. Any of these paths, do we just one take after deep contemplation, or it is in the spur of the moment, or it is something that they feel during deep meditation?
Okay, is it something that's done on the spur of the moment, or they feel in deep meditation? But I missed the first part.
Deep contemplation.
Right. Does deep contemplation?
To understand what is the path. Yes, after we understand what is the path, we think about it for many days and many days and many days. And does one do like that, or how is it?
Taking the vow, do you mean?
Yes.
Okay,
or
yeah.
Any of those.
Yes. Okay, good. I almost thought it has to be that, but I didn't want to just assume. Yes, it's a very good question. What process does one undergo? No matter what, it should be a carefully considered process, as you said, because we are taking a vow, and a vow is a promise to God. Just as taking the discipleship vow, you prepared for it, you all who took it, by reading the book, by coming to the classes, and by thinking yourself, is this something I want? And it couldn't just be done casually, just that, oh yeah, do you feel it? Fine. We do say, truthfully, that if you feel in level 1, I'm a disciple, I love this master and I want to be with him, you can vow yourself as his disciple that evening. In your own at home, in your altar, at your altar, or in the temple here, or whatever. So the inner aspect of it matters, and we don't have to wait. We don't have to deny that feeling. But to know that we're fully prepared, to know what's ahead of us, and so on, definitely it takes study, contemplation, and so on. For the pilgrim vow, for example, if somebody wished to take the pilgrim vow, I would ask them to read the full Nayaswami order book, so they have the whole picture in front of them, so they're making an informed decision. There aren't any quote-unquote strict requirements of behavior or dress or anything associated with the pilgrim vow, and sometimes for that reason people may feel that, there's a vow, sure, I'll take it. But, again, you're making a promise to God, you're going to want to read the fine print and be clear on what you're getting into. And do you want this? But really it's a decision of the heart. For the other vows, the Tyagi vow or the Nayaswami vow or the Brahmachari vow, these are vows that even if people are clear they want to do, it takes years of preparation to be able to take the vow. Because it's not so much that there's training, but there's also sitting with it and really seeing, is this right for me if you're single, or is this right for us if you're married? And again, if you're married, it's both of you would take the vow. It's not a question of, well, one does, even though the other spouse doesn't want to. So anyway, I don't want to emphasize the process too much because it's very individual. But as I said, for the pilgrim vow, the outer requirement would be that you read the book, you or anyone, not you, because I think you've already done it, but that one reads the
I
book
understand.
and
I
uh,
understand.
and and thinks about it. Yeah. But again, this is something that someone feels to do. One reason I'm showing this video to you all now is partly for historical purposes and also to put this in context. I didn't want to open the class with this 4 weeks, 3 weeks ago, because I didn't want you to think this was just about, taking vows and so on. But it is an important thing. And as I said, we've all taken vows, those who have, of discipleship, and also of Kriya. And this applies to these vows as well. The great benefit they give us, but also how serious they are. Not in a worrying way. As Swamiji said, if you make a mistake or you don't live up to it, just brush yourself off, dust yourself off, and just try again. So much of the problem on the spiritual path happens when people make mistakes and then get all weird about it. And there's no need. On the one hand, there's nothing to be weird about, and on the other hand, we're all way more weirder than we even realize compared to God. So let's just get to God. He alone is not weird. Okay? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Nice to see you. Okay. So, Mary out of hiding.
Jay, I just wanted to share on one point that Swamiji mentioned in the talk, Jay, about how the vow itself is so powerful. Uh, Thanks to Swamiji's words and all your guidance, Jay, because in the past, as I've shared with you, this just rereading this vow itself has helped me through so many challenges. It has really brought down all the, what shall I say, disturbing thoughts, when you're not able to reconcile with the situation, and yet you have to go beyond it. It's that blind corner thing that you need to get past of, and that's where this vow has helped me time and again, Jay. So I always have it on my phone as notes, and I keep referring to it. So grateful
Wonderful.
to Swamiji and to Ananda for that.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank
Thank
you
you,
for
Jay.
sharing that. And that's a very good point. And again, this is something that anyone can do also with, for example, the discipleship vow. You have the level 3 book, and so you could just type it or take a photo of it, and that, as Mary had suggested, keep it in your phone, and you can look at that. The Kriya vow, if you guys want the Kriya, if anybody wants the Kriya vow who's taken Kriya, let me know. We can get that to you. Um, but it's very helpful as reminders to us of what's important. What have we, again, vowed to do with our lives? And it really, as she said, can bring us back to center and cut through a lot of confusion. So I'm very glad to hear that. Okay, Lakshmi? Oh, 1 second. Okay. Okay. Nice to see you.
I enjoyed the like commentary, especially where he was trying to clarify about this how Shankaracharya, I mean, he's trying to bring those vows because and he's not, he could not explain it to people because it was not about consciousness at that time. Nobody was to understand that everything is consciousness, and that part, generally, everything about the talk was good and. Basically, I'm only thinking about God and Guru's place. Like if it's just that like the 25% of effort that they talk about, I think the most effort that we really do is just reach up, and I don't think there is really any difficulty at there's a point when the mental fight is stopped and something just begins. Wherein you were talking about like the way, like if somebody is hurting you, you're like suddenly the heart is able to accommodate much easily. Yeah, you have your times when you lose, and then but again it just come back like oh somebody said okay fine. Today I didn't do maybe tomorrow I'll just try one more time. So I'm only thinking about the grace of the Guru and how that's why. And like you said, I'm still the discipleship path. 25% of the effort is what you need to put out, and rest is really taken care of by you. Not.
Very good.
Experience that is amazing. Say much about this. For me, however, I feel that also is more or less like that. It could be a effort, like maybe all you need to put is 25% and then God just goes really good with everyone. So it's not really like you are doing some kind of specific drill or something. It's something else. It's like what Swami was talking is about this. The whole experience should be good. Not be I can feel discipleship like that, and I think Swami are also more or less amazing.
Very good. Very good. That's very, very well said. And thank you for sharing that. Okay, Ilango.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Good to see you all. Yeah, I enjoyed the video of Swamiji connecting from Pune Ashram. So it's a well-known place. We're able to connect well, and he was so exuberant and very deeply connected. I liked that video very much. It was really nice. And the song he chanted, sang the one he created, was also so good that he was singing that one. And I also noted that you observed that the Swami is, you made a comment that during your talk now, that the Swami is silent not because of the position of weakness, but because of more centeredness and the strength he is emanating. So I was able to connect to that particular point. Thank you so much.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you. Thank you. And I'm glad you've been to Pune and to that house and could connect with that. Yeah, many times. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Ritu and Devaki, you were here at one point, but then you ran away. Are you able to come back? But Ritu.
Saying the spiritual path has to be samadhi oriented, and rather than rejecting the false reality. So that was something which I really liked. And so, yeah, that's it. Yeah. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Devaki going once? Are you even here still? Did she go? Okay. Well, that's all right. Well, it's anybody else? You have one more shot before we move on. If you don't have your video, you can type in the chat that you wanted to talk, or else you could raise your hand. Or? Yeah, why don't you, Vani, we can hear you. I hope. Okay, we can see you too.
Can you see me?
We can. It is a beautiful sight.
Good evening, everybody.
Good afternoon. Yes.
Namaste. Well, nice to see Swamiji's beautiful laugh.
Mhm.
He was in real bliss. You can make it out.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was wondering what were the vows that he was referring to. If you can send me in detail.
I can do better than that. We're about to watch him give the vows in the ceremony. Those are the next videos.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, very good.
That's what crossed my mind.
Excellent. Well, you are exactly in tune. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
So nice to see you. Really warms our hearts to see you. So,
Thank you so much.
okay. So having said that, let's go on to see Swamiji giving the different vows. What I'll do is we'll watch each one. I may say something in between, but But for now, we'll start with the first vow that he gave that evening, which was the pilgrim vow. And the text of all of these vows are written out in the book. I've sent the link to the group a few times, but it's nayaswami.org. O-R-G is where the book is for free. But we can also post the vows, especially, again, the pilgrim vow, if you're interested. But anyway, let's watch Swamiji give the pilgrim vow. It starts with the end of his talk, but the end of the video, unfortunately, on the night that they were filming, had a problem, and so there were a few minutes that were lost of his talk, unfortunately. So it starts right when the cameraman quickly turned the video back on, with the very end of Swamiji's talk and then the giving of the vow. I've cut out some of the parts in between. Like, in other words, we're not going to watch all 25 people take the vow. Take the blessing and so on, but I think we'll see at least one or two. So, okay. Okay, so that was the pilgrim vow, and as you saw, Swamiji was moved to see how many people came to take that vow. In Gorgon, he wrote the vow, the pilgrim vow. He had the idea for it as he was, I think, getting into the car, and he turned to his secretary Lakshman and said, I think I'm going to add another vow to the Nayaswami order. And people only found out about it basically the day before the ceremony. And one person even got on a plane that night from Bangalore, I think it was, to fly to Gorgon in order to take the vow that was just created. But there wasn't a lot of warning, and so there were some who took it, but not many. But here, of course, in Pune, there were so many, so he was very touched and by that. I think let's just go on to the next vows, and then we'll talk at the end of them all. But I'll just say something in between, maybe, but nothing long. So. Okay, so just a note about the color. You may have been wondering, was that a blue color that Swamiji gave? In fact, it was a sort of turquoise or teal, greenish blue color. And when Swamiji originally was creating the order, he felt that that would be a good color for the Tyagis. And so that was the color. And so then I think it was about a year later, Swamiji said he had an insight and an inspiration that really that Tyagi color should be white. It should be changed to white, so that the colors were master's colors, which are the colors of the spiritual eye, blue, white, and gold, for the order also. And so the Tyagis were turned from teal color to white. So in some of the ancient Tyagi photos, it's not so ancient, just 10 years ago, you'll see this teal color. And it tested some of the Tyagis in their non-attachment, because of course they had the blue clothes, they had the blue watch band, some of them had blue purses, teal, this turquoise, and suddenly all those things had to be abandoned and turned to white. And then you can bleach a white dress teal, but you can't bleach a teal thing back to white. And so anyway, it was quite something. So anyway, that's that teal color that he put the scarf around Satisha's neck. Okay, so now on to the brahmacharis, or the brahmacharya vow. Okay, and then the last one is the Nayaswami vow, and these were two women who took this vow. The first one dressed in, I think she's dressed in orange. Anyway, you'll see. She was a Swami already in another order, another branch of the order, and so she wanted to join the Nayaswami order and basically take on this as a sort of a better expression of what she was trying to follow already. And the other woman is Nayaswami Pramila, who many of you have met in Pune or seen her videos online, or you can see them. She's a part of Ananda Pune and a longtime member. Okay, well, um, uh, any questions or comments about that? If you could just type them in if you have any questions or comments that you'd like to share. And while you're doing that, I'd like to also include the last suggestions that Swamiji gave us for overcoming the ego. That we had covered so many, but I wanted to do the last ones. Okay. So, do type away if you have something you'd like to say. Meanwhile, Swamiji gives us this suggestion for overcoming the ego. Never draw people's attention to yourself. Try to keep it centered in the topic under discussion. Number 23. If someone challenges your point of view, never let the discussion sink to a level of personal animosity. I once mentioned to my father something I'd read once about a claim that the Mexican Central Plateau had risen suddenly in a cataclysm to its present height. My father, who, as a geologist, believed in what is called gradualism, scoffed at this claim. When I tried to defend it, he said, "I think you ought to respect my opinion." I replied, "I do indeed respect it, as an opinion." Both of us quickly veered away from what threatened to become a perfectly useless argument. 24. Try to have neither a superiority nor an inferiority complex. Tell yourself simply, whatever is, and whatever I am, I am. I refuse to make value judgments in the matter. All of us are simply playing our parts in the cosmic drama. Let me do my best only to play my part well. Every day and throughout the day, try to reduce your self-definition to zero. If you are famous in the eyes of the world, tell yourself, I am nothing and no one. If you hold an important position of any kind, tell yourself, when I die, all this will be lost. Even now then, I am nothing. If you are unknown or despised and rejected by others, tell yourself, in my nothingness, I am everything. I am not this body. I am a part, equally so to all other parts of infinite reality. Number 26. Try to see God in all, and to love Him in all. For everyone on earth, each in his own way and no matter how mistakenly, is trying to find his own nature, divine bliss. And finally, number 27. When death itself comes, as it must some day, offer your life gladly up to God, to infinite consciousness. Never dwell on the mistakes you've made in your life. Offer them rather to God and tell Him, I claim for myself no credit or blame for anything I have done. I am forever an offshoot of thy infinite perfection. So then Swamiji continues a comment at the end of this list of 27 points. I have offered here a few suggestions only for how you can rise above ego. Think of these thoughts as starters merely to guide you in your own efforts to thread your way through the intricate maze of Maya. I remember years ago, he says, working earnestly on developing humility. To my astonishment, I awoke one morning to the realization that I was becoming proud of my humility. Ego transcendence is the very essence of spiritual progress. One wonders why so little teaching has been devoted to it, and so much more emphasis has been placed on ego suppression. This was Suganta's question, essentially. One wonders also why, especially among renunciates, so much attention has been given to indirect efforts, such as eliminating attachments and desires. Naturally, these self-limitations must be renounced also, the energy formerly committed to them channeled upward, unidirectionally to the brain and the spiritual eye, between the eyebrows. I can only think that the reason ego transcendence has received so little attention is that most people during Kali Yuga could not comprehend that the ego really has no existence except in its fleeting dream reality. This brief seeming is only, as my guru said, like a glimmer of sunlight reflected in a sliver of glass on the roadside. Even at the beginning of this Dwapara Yuga, matter itself has been shown to consist only of vibrations of energy. It is possible now to understand, at least intellectually, that our separate reality is only an ever-changing cloud, and that we are all, in truth, but a single reality. So, this last part was added a little bit later in the first draft of the chapter. I think it ended there. And then we were all reading these and going, some of us were reading these and going, oh, perfect. Oh, we love it. Oh, this is so excellent. Oh, this will be hard to follow, but I want to. Again, as Gopal said, it appeals to me. And then Swamiji continued writing. Does it look to you as though I were trying to reduce everyone to a pale shadow? If so, let me say further that I myself only really began to accomplish anything in my own life once I'd succeeded in persuading myself that God alone was the doer. I tried at one point to see if, by sitting back and turning it all over to Him, He would take over. It was an experiment, nothing more. I was lecturing in church and at a certain point simply stopped speaking and waited for Him to step in and speak through me. Well, He didn't. I was convinced then that I had to do my bit. Paramhansa Yogananda taught people to pray, I will reason, I will, I will act, but guide Thou my reason, will, and activity to the right path in everything. We have to play our part. But if we tell ourselves, He is the doer, He can infuse His power into me, we find He won't do it. At least, as long as I remained unspeaking, complete silence reigned. I was unembarrassed, but some people in the audience believed anxiously that I had frozen with fear. One or two friends, after reading what I've written about eliminating the ego, have protested, but how then will Master's prediction be fulfilled when he said someday lion-like swamis will come from India and spread this message all over, meaning come from India to America? So in other words, how can following these things produce lion-like swamis? Do they think I've counseled everyone to become a wimp? Far from it. The more one can get himself out of the way, the better God will be able to work through him. What happens is that one learns to use his own, but God-given power. Okay, so any comments or questions? Would anyone like to take a parting shot? Yes. When can one take the vow? So it's a very good question. The first vow that one takes, supposing one wants to take any of the vows, the first vow that one takes is the pilgrim vow. In other words, the pilgrim vow serves as a vow in itself, and some people may take that vow and remain, you could say, pilgrims for their whole lives. And that's perfectly fine and right and beautiful. Some people who may want to take the other vows, the brahmachari vow or the tyagi vow, would still take the pilgrim vow first as a initial step. In terms of when one would take the pilgrim vow, it's been a long time since we've offered a vow ceremony, And again, it wasn't necessarily our intention in creating this class to offer a ceremony, but if people are interested, and already a few people have written and said that they are, the requirement would be to read this book cover to cover, or which is to say, click on every chapter that's on the nayaswami.org site, the book I was just reading from. That was chapter 9, by the way. And so read through that, read through the vow, and once you've read that, then let me know, and I can send you an application to take the pilgrim vow, and then we would organize some kind of a vow ceremony. So relatively soon, basically the amount of time it takes to read the book and for us to sort of logistically gather everybody. The pilgrim vow can be done at any time, more or less like the discipleship vow. You know, when someone is ready and they've completed the requirement of reading the book, in the case of discipleship, in the case of the pilgrim vow, they can take that vow. As for the other vows, as I said, first step is the pilgrim vow, so that's more or less right there. And then it takes usually years of preparation to make sure that taking one of the next vows is the right choice for someone. So that's always a case-by-case situation. What I want to emphasize is please don't anyone feel excluded or left out of these vows. As I said, the pilgrim vow Swamiji specifically created for everyone, and it's a very beautiful vow. It's very powerful. Every time I hear it, I'm inspired, partly because it was the last vow to be written, and it has the sort of specialness of that, as we were learning what the other vows were saying, to have this sort of bonus gift of a vow be there. You can take the pilgrim vow and get all the way to God. You can take none of these vows and live as a disciple of Master and, of course, get all the way to God. So, again, forgive me. There sometimes is confusion, but if I'm a disciple or if I'm a Kriya Bond, or what about the Ananda monastic order, or what about the Nayaswami order, it can be confusing. I'm conveniently solving these by quietly ducking out at the end of class, and this is the end of the class. So I'm joking. I'm happy to answer any questions. You can write to me directly or we can talk about it. But anyway, if you want to take the pilgrim vow, read the book. Okay.
I enjoyed Swamiji asking someone to come in and sit down and sign language.
Wasn't that touching? I'm so glad you brought that up. I felt the same way. It's just so sort of familiar, so I don't want to say human, but it's just so dear to just see how he was like that. I know. Who said that? Prem.
Agnel says, once we take the vow wholeheartedly, and even if we forget, God remembers and never lets us go away from Him. He makes sure that we stick to the path. That is the surest blessing.
It's very true, and people experience that with discipleship. They come back to Sunday satsang maybe after a gap, and it's a discipleship day, and suddenly there's a discipleship initiation, and it brings it all back to them. Or they get an announcement about a Kriya initiation, even though they've already taken Kriya, and they decide, yes, I'm going to come. It sort of comes up right at the right time or right when they need it. So I agree with you very much. And that's one of the benefits Agnel is pointing out of taking a vow. Because when you put your energy out, when you commit, when you make a promise to God, spoken aloud before others, that sort of introduces an extra wave of grace and support that can help you. On the other hand, you don't want to take it lightly. And we try to make sure here that nobody takes a vow of discipleship of Kriya or any of these Nayaswami vows lightly, because it's simply not safe to take it lightly. You must be sincere, as Master said. And so we work with that too. But rather than emphasize the risks, I'd rather emphasize the benefits, just as Agnel said. It's true. It just, God reaches into your life and grabs you and takes you forward, which He does for all devotees. Again, we're not trying to separate, but this is in the context of a vow. And so, good point. Okay. Aprama?
Mary is just saying thank you for the videos.
You're most welcome. I enjoyed watching them too.
Babu and Bindu said thank you for making us understand the vows clearly.
Oh, good. I'm so glad you said that, because that was certainly my effort, or at least that was my wish, I should say. And so I'm so glad to hear that it was clear. Again, you can read all these vows in the book. I mean, it's one thing to have them in front of you to read and to study, but to also see Swamiji give it just in real time and to just feel the power. Such a power when Swamiji was, you could say, administering those vows or giving those vows to people. Very powerful. So anyway, thank you both for saying that. I appreciate that. And?
Finally, Sugata types, are we not already pilgrims now after coming on this path?
Are we not pilgrims now after already coming on this path? You know, it's a good question. It's a good point, because in a certain sense, we could say that anyone on the spiritual path can rightly think of themselves as a devotee, for example. It comes up, though, a devotee of what? I mean, you can't say a devotee of your guru if you haven't taken a guru. Of course, many of you on this path have, but still, I'm saying anyone on the spiritual path, any spiritual path, or even seeking spiritually and not on a specific path, could be called a devotee. But again, a devotee of what? A devotee of God, perhaps? Sure, that's what it means to be spiritual. Is it that it's related to God? But also you could say, I don't want to say more accurately, but at least as accurately, a devotee of truth. That I am devoted to finding the truth, to learning the truth, to experiencing the truth of my own nature, of God, of this reality, of other people. You could say, I want to know the truth. In my mind, at least, and in my experience, this is really one of the very strong dividing lines between people on the spiritual path and people not on the spiritual path. That someone on the spiritual path cares what is true and what isn't true. And if someone doesn't care, as we find, you tell somebody something and they just say, even if it's true, so what? Or, who cares? That's just an opinion. And they don't have that understanding that it matters whether something is true and whether we have done the right thing or not. Again, that appeals to us. If it doesn't appeal to someone, then they're not really ready for the spiritual path. It really is a search for truth. Swamiji told a man, he was a close friend of Swamiji's in a way, not on the spiritual path, and he was trying to convince the man, because the man was asking, Swamiji was giving him all the reasons why being on the spiritual path was practical, useful, a very good thing to do, and so on. And the man said, you know, that all may be true, but I'm just not interested. And that's not the tone of a devotee, because the truth automatically interests a devotee. I'm not criticizing the man. And even as devotees, we have to look at what are those things that I know are true, but I just pretend not to pay attention to them. Things in myself, or habits that I should be following in terms of certain healthful practices, but let me not concentrate on those right now. So it's an never-ending process, but there's a basic feeling of I want to know the truth. So you could call yourself a devotee, you could call yourself a truth seeker. That's another name that Swamiji would sometimes refer to, and maybe Master also. But also a spiritual aspirant, but then we get too sort of complex. We could say a pilgrim too. All of us are pilgrims. And so in the sense of, could you call yourself a pilgrim, lowercase p, meaning in the general sense of the word? Yes, of course. But then to call yourself a pilgrim with an uppercase p, as in this specific, using pilgrim as a proper name, that I have taken this pilgrim vow, you would want to take the pilgrim vow. You could say, before calling yourself that kind of a pilgrim. But again, the purpose is not to call yourself anything. In fact, it's to call yourself nothing, really, or to call yourself God, as everybody else is God too. But the thing is that you could really say, isn't everybody on the spiritual path striving to do the things that are said on the in the pilgrim vow? Maybe. And on the other hand, it's a good description of what a devotee should do. But of course, we didn't have that description until Swamiji wrote it. I didn't come up with that, and I would be hard-pressed to know what to write a devotee would do, besides what I've just told you. And so when he wrote that, it was extremely clarifying. And we could recommend it. Anybody on the spiritual path, read this and follow it. And if you feel to, maybe you would like to take this vow, to say it out loud, to add strength to your resolution. You see, nothing, on the one hand, we don't need to do anything to become who we are. We are who we are. On the other hand, sometimes people feel inspired, attracted. It appeals to them to say, I wish to stand up and declare this to God in a ceremony, because it's something that I feel very sacredly. Maybe a private ceremony with no one else around. It's not to declare it before others necessarily, but something that I really feel to commit myself to. It's a decision of the heart, and that goes along with Annapurni's question of, how do people come to such a decision? It's the same thing as taking discipleship. How did we decide to become disciples? Some of us may have felt, I want to Kriya Yoga, and if discipleship is required, fine, I'll take it because I want that Kriya Yoga. Then they come to find how much more powerful the discipleship vow is perhaps than they realized at first. I hope all of us feel that way, because it is very powerful. And how could we know the full extent of it beforehand? Some people take the discipleship vow because they feel it from the beginning. It's such a connection to Yoganandaji. Others come looking for a guru, and they find their guru in Yoganandaji. Others aren't coming for any of this, saying, I just was trying to lower my BP. But here I am now in level 3, and I think there's something to these things, and I think I will. And if it means becoming Yoganandaji's disciple, now we have the Answer movie that we show to people, so it helps them a lot more than when you and I were growing up and we didn't have that. But still, from your own choice that it was a decision of the heart that nobody could really talk you into, nobody could talk you out of. And you can't necessarily explain why or how it appeals to you, but it does. Okay?
Deepak,
Hi Deepak, how are you? Hope you're doing well.
do we take the vows from Nayaswamis, and which was the book you were referring to regarding all the vows?
Yes, the book is called The Renunciate Order for the New Age. What I'd love to do is hold it up for you, but in fact, I myself don't even have a physical copy. We gave the last copy away to somebody. I can't remember who, but I remember the act of giving it away to her. The book is on nayaswami.org, nayaswami.org. You'll just see, literally, you click on that, and then the right side, left column, you'll see the book. And so you can read the text of the book there. The pilgrim vow can be given by a brahmachari. So brahmacharis can give the pilgrim vow, though very often, at Ananda anyway, the pilgrim vow is given by Nayaswamis, but it can be given by brahmacharis or brahmacharinis. The brahmachari vow and the Tyagi vows can be given by a Nayaswami. So in other words, a Nayaswami can give someone the brahmachari vow, or two people the Tyagi vows, the vow. The Nayaswami, to become a Nayaswami, Swamiji wrote something interesting. He said there should be 3 Nayaswamis who meet and who discuss this person's basically application to become a Nayaswami. And they should be 3 Nayaswamis who are, and 2 of them should not be husband and wife. And so, we were saying it takes 3 Nayaswamis who are not married to each other, because they can be married, but there shouldn't be 2 of them on the committee, you should say. It should be 3 unrelated Nayaswamis. And, presumably the person, the Tyagi or the brahmachari wanting to take the Nayaswami vow approaches 3 Nayaswamis who he or she feels to ask, and then they discuss together. This is the practice, and it is done. At the time that Swamiji was around, sometimes people would, I shouldn't say when Swamiji was around, but when Swamiji first created the order, some people just wrote to him directly for taking the Nayaswami order, Nayaswami vow, and Swami Kriyanandaji counted as 3. It just in himself. So sometimes he alone would say, okay. The reason why he made it 3 is he said that it shouldn't just be dependent on the opinion of one person, because in that case it's too easy for people to just promote somebody with a preference, or for somebody who likes a particular person because they are like themselves, especially if they have some organizational flair, for example, to promote that person, and to make it a little less susceptible to this kind of preferential treatment, to make it 3. I assume 3 because if it were 2, you could have a tie. And so 3. You don't really want to hear somebody say, well, it was 2-1, so you made it. You'd rather it be unanimous, but still, this idea that it should be the spiritual qualification of the person, not the organizational qualification by any means, not their practical skills, not their, not only position, but I would say their wealth, if they had any wealth, that there shouldn't be these extraneous things influencing that, which of course ideally one wouldn't influence. But remember, Swamiji was creating this beyond Ananda, more broadly. And so you could have 3 Nayaswamis who have never a part of Ananda, and they could make another Nayaswami. And so he built some of this in there, not just as a protocol to be followed, but also to help us to understand the principle, the ideal behind that, the reason for that. The practice of 3 people, for example, is superficial on one level compared to the deeper thing that there shouldn't be preference. We shouldn't sort of kind of promote people that for any other reasons than their spiritual qualification. And remember, the qualifications for all of the vows are those 14 marks of a true renunciate that Swamiji did in the videos before today, and that he read through and we covered again just at the end. Sometimes that is mistakenly quoted as the 14 marks of a Nayaswami, and that's not what Swamiji wrote. It's the 14 marks of a true renunciate, even someone who has taken no vow at all. Okay? And again, to sort of echo Sugantha's point, all of us can live by these principles, and indeed should live by these principles, from the pilgrim vow to the Nayaswami vow. They are something that can benefit us all, and are things we've committed ourselves to as devotees, as disciples. Some of the specific things in terms of our outer behavior, that's, as I said, more a question of karma, a question of personality, of taste. It's definitely not, this is better than the other. What's best for you is what you should do, and likely what you are already doing. Okay, anything else before we go? Someone's saying, it's past my bedtime, or I am hungry, and what is the vow to say to be able to have dinner? No, I'm joking.
Ritu is typing, how do Nayaswamis outside Ananda work? Will it not lead to organizational conflicts?
Will it lead to organizational conflicts? I don't know about organizational conflicts, but people have asked that question. Since it's more broad than Ananda, what will happen? I mean, in other words, some people have asked, what if it's diluted, for example? Or when we were first presenting the Nayaswami order, when Swamiji was writing the book, Haridas Ji and I happened to be in Bangalore for a corporate workshop, or at least corporate meetings, because we were doing corporate trainings back then, and we met with the Bangalore group. Of course, Haridas Ji and Romaji now lead the Bangalore center, but this was in the early days, before they had a center. Before there was a center even. So we were announcing this, and somebody asked, I'm concerned that other people from outside Ananda will join this, and then they will dilute it, and then they will sort of lesser its value. And Haridas said, listen, you don't have to worry about that. You can put on a blue robe, but you can't put on a blue face. In other words, who you are will always shine through your eyes and your example. And everyone knows that. There are so many savvy people who can tell when somebody's faking and putting on a show. There are a lot of people who don't know that either, but that's okay. India's policy has always been basically live and let live. That if something is really spiritual, it will flourish. And if it isn't, it will fall by the wayside like so many other things have. This is even a quote in the Bible, even though sadly it is not necessarily practiced this way. But anyway, leave it alone. One of the rabbis was asked about Jesus Christ. What do you think of him? And he said, if this man and his teachings are not of God, then we needn't worry, because they will naturally die out, because they will have no power. And if they are of God, we dare not oppose them. And so that's very much the attitude in India as well, and it's really wonderful because it allows things to thrive naturally. Yes, it's true that sometimes proper cultivation can make the wild garden a little prettier, a little more tame, and it can help things perhaps to grow even more quickly. But we just prefer to go by intuition and sincerity. And sincerity. We'll see what will happen. It hasn't happened so far. The head of the Nayaswami order is Nayaswami Bharat, who most of you know from Bharat Cornell, from Finding Happiness, from the Sharing Nature with Children books, from the Om book that he wrote, Om, the Melody of Love, Anandiji's husband, because many of you have met Anandiji over our Skype calls. So anyway, he is the head of the Nayaswami order, and he's the one primarily, though not exclusively, working with people outside the order. There have been Christian monks and nuns who have taken this vow. In the very first Nayaswami initiation in 2009 that Swamiji held, there was a nun, an Italian nun, I think Italian, who took this vow and became, the first Nayaswami outside the order, and that was in the first initiation. So it was expansive from the start. So anyway, we'll just see how it goes. But let's pray that for the masters, on the one hand, to take care of it, and also for all of us by our own. I don't want to say our own example, because it's really not so much that we should be an example for others, but by our own sincerity, that we magnetize the order and the spiritual path. Okay, and with that, please, Sapringa. Okay, but anyway, thank you for joining this class, and it's been fun for me. I hope it's been fun for you. It's hard not to sort of have all the smiles and the connecting at the end of each class, and certainly now at the end of the whole thing. But I do want to remind you, I think most of you know, but just to say again, next Wednesday, without missing a beat, we're going to start a new class series on Sri Yukteswarji's book, The Holy Science. This is the book that Babaji asked Sri Yukteswarji to write. And so it's amazing that we have this book not only written by Sri Yukteswarji and mentioned in Autobiography of a Yogi, which is already quite something, but that it was a book commissioned by Babaji to write. In a certain sense, it's one of the most tangible proofs or connections we have to Babaji, is that he asked this book to be written, and here it is. So we'll go through the Holy Science. It'll be a 4-week class, in terms of what we expect we can cover from this extremely deep book in 4 weeks. But on the other hand, to do nothing at all doesn't seem right either. So anyway, we'll be sending out a link and an information for that class, the cost of the class, and so on. And so you'll be seeing that. So look for it if you're interested. It'd be nice to gather again and continue on in this way. Especially now that we have an extension of lockdown, let's continue on with the next Wednesday class. So thank you again. Please write to me individually if you would like to. It's always a joy to hear from you. And some people, prefer that rather than talking or writing in the public way, and that's perfectly fine. It's always nice to have a chance to connect. So thank you all for being here, and good night.
Thank you, Ji. Good night.
Thank you, voice from the heavens. Oh, there, yeah, thank you,
Thank you,
Mary.
Ji.
Thank you,
Thank
Purni.
you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ji.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.